favorite hobby one, and then just that one question about zero RB stand, and then we'll go into the draft.
Sounds good, man.
Sweet. All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 21 of the Snake in the Draft podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Vines. You can find me on Twitter at jsnake_DFF. In this episode, I have Andrew Mackens coming on the podcast. You should follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Mackens. He's the editor-in-chief for the Undroppables and the host of the Pod After Touchdown podcast. Today, we are going to go through a 15-round redraft mock for a 1QB PPR league. Welcome, Andrew. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jacob. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking to do, as many podcasts and meet more people in the community as possible. And going into what looks like a legitimate 2020 football season, I'm super excited. I can't believe we're only 2 weeks away.
I completely agree. I was super nervous it was like July with what was happening with baseball and in August. And yeah, just super happy that we're going to have a football season because this is my first year in Dynasty Fantasy Football, like Twitter, really, because last year I joined it pretty late. So excited to be in the Twitter world. And honestly, yeah, just happy. And I'm glad that you could come on the podcast because this will be my first like mock draft with the podcast going. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I think one mantra I have tweeted out before is ABD, always be drafting. So I think mock drafts are super great to help you, at least get an idea of what you should expect in your drafts. And so, being able to run through it, get a feeling of what your teams look like when you make certain picks at certain rounds, it gives you practice, it gives you repetition, and that's super important. So I'm glad we could bring this to your audience.
Yeah, I completely agree. So one question I ask every guest is, what is one hobby that you really enjoy doing that does not relate to fantasy football?
Yeah, I love this question. And, it's got to be, for me, gaming. Anytime that I love watching TV, movies, just like everyone else, listening to music as well. And I love chatting about those things. But when it comes down to what I spend the most time doing outside of fantasy and just normal day job stuff, it's gaming. I've been playing a ton of Call of Duty Warzone since that's a free to play game. It's great to play with friends. I love being competitive and just, picking up the sticks and getting in the zone.
I love that. I used to play a ton of Xbox with Fortnite when it first came out, and then Apex Legends. Played that a ton. I've stopped playing it because I started graduate school, and then also my Xbox broke right at quarantine time. So a little bit of a bummer, but are you just into Warzone? Was there anything did you play like Apex or Fortnite or anything like that?
Yeah. So, I've been gaming for as long as I can remember. And I've been playing a lot of new games, I bought the BioShock collection. I've been playing a lot of the Far Cry games with a close friend. And I have played Fortnite. I don't play that anymore. I loved Apex Legends, but I only had a couple friends playing it. So Warzone has become the default game just because that is, what all of my friends are playing and what they have access to. I played hundreds of hours of Overwatch. I love the Fallout games. And so I've been playing a little bit of Outer Worlds as well. So it really runs the gamut, definitely shooter first. But the one game I wish that I could play right now and I can't is Fall Guys. And I don't know if you've been hearing about it at all, but it's basically like a Mario Party style, arcade kind of game for kids. And they have it in a battle royale style, so you can still be super competitive and get triggered when you fall to your death.
That's awesome. I'll have to check that out. I know I don't have an Xbox working. I've debated on fixing it a couple of times, but honestly, it's been good because I've been able to put all that extra time into Twitter, which has been a fun little thing. But before we get started with the mock, I do have a question for you. I saw on Twitter that you are a zero RB stan. So what does zero RB mean to you?
Yeah, I appreciate you finding that and pointing it out because I really thought this year I was going to go running back heavy. And then the more I read up on this and got pulled back into the zero RB strategy, I realized I can't quit zero RB. And really what it means to me more than anything else is zigging when the rest of the managers in your draft are zagging. Because if you really think about it, in a redraft league, like this mock that we're about to do, there's 12 teams. And that means each manager before the draft even starts has an 8.33% chance of winning. So you have to find and create advantages for yourself, not just on a season-long basis, but on a week-to-week basis. And there are, only so many ways you can increase your chances. And I think zero RB is a great strategy that, focuses on helping you create strategic advantages at different position groups, other than keeping a balanced team, and then taking advantage of the volatility of the running back position, and that randomness of injury or someone superseding the incumbent that started the year off great, but ended up losing the job. Taking advantage of things like that, where a young guy comes in and takes a lot of opportunity, you're really stocking up on those high upside guys. So come playoff time, you have an even stronger team than when you started.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to not just lump yourself into one strategy. Like I'm drafting in this mock at the 1.08, you're drafting the 1.02. So I may end up going zero RB just because that's who falls to me. I would not be surprised at all. Well, I expect you to probably go with Saquon at the 1.02. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the mock draft. So with this, again, Andrew is the 1.02. I'm the 1.08. So we're going to talk through our picks as they go. This is with some people from Twitter as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So we got the 1.01 right here. I'm going to give it like a 99% chance being CMC. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, it was funny because for the Undroppables months ago now, I actually wrote a devil's advocate piece on Christian McCaffrey and how, you don't have to draft him at the 101 just because when someone gets that high of a ceiling, it's very possible that, they're going to succumb to injury or not see the same efficiency they saw or the same volume they saw in the past. And, as we're talking here, Saquon Barkley actually went 101. So I'm not going to kill anyone for taking McCaffrey either. And I'm going to take him here. It's kind of like the chalk pick, but there are other avenues you can take. Like I like Barkley a lot. They're basically, number one and number two. And now we got a fellow undroppable KL Fantasy picking next.
Yeah, I really like the honestly, if you're pick one or pick two, there's really no mistake there. You're going to get the top two running backs. A lot of people like Zeke. Ooh, surprising. Alvin Kamara picked number 3 above Zeke. I don't think you're surprised by that. And then Zeke at number 4. Man, no one's going to leave me a running back, are they?
So that's the big thing that I, as a zero RB truther, I won't give anyone shit for taking 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds, especially at your spot, because if there are a legitimate 14 running backs that we could list off that I think are bell cows that are all talented at the position and going to see a significant majority of their opportunity. And it pretty much cuts off right between like Aaron Jones and then like Todd Gurley, Leonard Fournette, James Conner. So anyone above that Aaron Jones running back, like you can easily take those guys. And then, the argument everyone's making with going running back heavy is just hammer wide receiver after that. So it's an entirely fine strategy. And I love that you took Derrick Henry here.
Yeah, so after Zeke was Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then Michael Thomas was taken, which I thought he was going to fall to me, and then it was Dalvin Cook, and then I took Derrick Henry. So I like Derrick Henry over someone like a Josh Jacobs or Devontae Adams because of his touchdown upside. And I know Josh Jacobs is also going to score a lot of touchdowns, but we've just seen Derrick Henry do it year in, year out. Well, Josh Jacobs, he did well last year, but he's really going to need that receiving upside, which I don't see him having it this year. What do you think about that, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, when you hear him talk about how he wants to get 60 receptions just because we want that to happen doesn't mean it's going to happen, which makes it tough. But he can definitely improve, especially being that he, burst onto the scene as a rookie. I think he has upside for more production going into his second year. And I think that they really are, a run-first team. Fun fact, and I've said this on other podcasts, is the Raiders fullback, Alec Ingold, actually went to my high school. So he's a famous alumni of ours. And I love him like lead blocking for Jacobs. And I want to root for that all year. But especially in PPR, I'll take Derrick Henry over Josh Jacobs because I think he even has opportunity for more receptions. And I think when you look at a guy like Derrick Henry, a lot of which are fading because of potential injuries and how many carries he's had, in those early rounds, you really want to just draft great players. And there's no more of an imposing player than Derrick Henry. And I am a Titans fan, so I'll say like there's a little bit of bias there, but I don't hate the pick, and he fell to you at 108. So I think that's great. And we're seeing a lot of running backs being taken. So I'm glad you got one of the real alphas in the league.
Yeah, so after Henry, Miles Sanders, Austin Eckler, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, and then now we're at the 2.02, which was Devontae Adams. I was really hoping he'd follow me. So, yeah, I agree with Derrick Henry. And one thing that we've seen posted on Twitter by the different injury docs like FB Injury Doc and Adam Hutchinson, who is with the Undroppables, may have also talked about this. But the best thing about running backs that get a lot of carries is the predictor of injury is actually having an injury. It's not the having a lot of carries that's going to make them get injured. So running backs like a Derrick Henry, like a Zeke, they're not as, quote, injury prone as people like to make them. And I think they're actually really safe picks because we've seen them produce for a long duration of time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure Derrick Henry's had some nicks and cuts here and there, but he hasn't had anything significant that's taken over his productivity. And there's a lot has been said the past couple of weeks in training camp hype as well. I think some people thought Darrington Evans was really going to make a splash and take opportunity away, but I feel like he's been struggling at camp. And so that means they're going to give Henry even more opportunity. That's what the offense ran through last year, and I don't see that changing at all.
Yeah, I agree. So after Adams, Julio Jones, Aaron Jones, and then I drafted Travis Kelce. So I like to get one of those top tight ends as early as possible. And I know this isn't a tight end premium or anything like that, but with these running backs, we're getting to that sort of ugly tier is what I would call it, where Kenyon Drake is the top one, and he's someone that I would like, but he's not 100% right now. So it makes me a little bit nervous. And then James Conner, Chris Carson, David Johnson, Todd Gurley, all of those people, like I'd probably rather have Jonathan Taylor for his upside. And then wide receiver, there was Tyreek Hill, which I debated, and then Hopkins and Godwin. So what do you think about Travis Kelce at the 2.05?
I think it's great. I think that, some analysts have said Travis Kelce and even George Kittle are first round worthy because of the surefire advantage they give you at the position. And, talking about zero RB, I'm going to, bring that up a lot during this mock draft and how you can actually implement it in your drafts. It's about getting advantage at other positions besides running back, and getting one of the top two tight ends is a huge part of that because you don't know what those other, flyers are going to be. You have to use multiple roster spots on them. If you hit on a late round breakout candidate, then that's going to be huge. Just that, we're talking about gaining advantages, drafting Patrick Mahomes, drafting Lamar Jackson when they were going in the late rounds, or drafting Darren Waller and Mark Andrews last year. Those are huge. So obviously, getting the late round breakouts are important, but if you don't have like a really good sense of who those guys are, like just lock up a difference making tight end that is going to give you that positional advantage from week one.
Yeah, and from what I've been listening to other podcasts and different things like that, I don't think there's really a surefire quarterback like Lamar Jackson last year that's just going to be coming in and dominating and being able to be that quarterback one. Like we've seen Patrick Mahomes have potential, but it's hard to say there's really a quarterback that you can just pinpoint as a guy who's going in the 10th or later rounds, and he's going to be like a top 5 quarterback. And I'd say same with tight ends. There's so many in that middle tier that I would personally just rather get one of those top tier tight ends and then just not even care and maybe get someone like a Irv Smith Jr. in like round 14, 15, and because he's mostly going to be undrafted. But after Travis Kelce was Tyreek Hill, Kenyon Drake, Chris Godwin, and then George Kittle at the 2.09, Kenny Galladay, and then Andrew, you picked DeAndre Hopkins.
It's crazy that he's fallen this far, and I know there's been some training camp whispers about him, either whether it's been his hamstring injury, not handling the dry heat as well as he, was able to handle the type of heat he had in Houston. I've also heard the arguments about the Cardinals spreading the ball around, and it's going to ruin his opportunity for, the 150 targets that he normally sees. But I have some bias towards DeAndre Hopkins. I love him as a player, and so I'm going to take him here because I think he is the go-to for Kyler Murray in this offense. He'll still see enough volume to be productive. I think, we say let Russ cook a lot, but let Cliff cook too. He's going to be getting this offense firing on all cylinders. And so I love Hopkins there. And, the reason I actually picked this, the second overall pick is because I want to show you guys how modified zero RB can happen as well. And that's a great way to go, especially if you are in the early rounds. You grab one of the surefire, the core 4 running backs, and then you can hammer some elite wide receivers and depth wide receivers in the early and middle rounds. And I love going that route as well.
Yeah, so the guy after you picked, Le'Veon Bell, which I think everybody's getting a little bit concerned about. I was surprised by that pick, actually, because all these people are from Twitter, and so I thought they'd be concerned. I'm starting to get a little concerned. I'd rather have Todd Gurley. I'd rather have Jonathan Taylor over Le'Veon Bell right now. So we have robust RB right before you, Saquon, Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley. And then, Andrew, you went ahead and drafted DJ Moore as the, was it wide receiver 8?
Yeah, I'm counting it out right now. I have him ranked as the wide receiver 7. And so that's the guy that I've been the most bullish on all offseason. It was actually, in terms of dynasty, like Kyle FF Recon had tweeted some stuff out over a year ago about his, profile and his ability to make the next step. And you look at what he actually did last year, 16 game pace in terms of full games played. He had more receiving yards in his second year than Michael Thomas had in his second year. And so I really, when you look at the tape, just from, highlights even, I think he does a lot of the same things Michael Thomas does, like catches everything that comes his way, those slant routes on like third and short or third and medium. He's going to catch all of those. I think Teddy Bridgewater's going to be an upgrade at quarterback from what he had last year. And you've got both Matt Rule and Joe Brady from LSU coming into the NFL and could easily take the league by storm with their passing game. And so I love the opportunity for DJ Moore to continue taking the next step. And I think from a dynasty perspective, because I know you're more of a dynasty guy, the idea behind that too is, where do we see DJ Moore getting drafted a year from now? Is he going to disappoint and be in the like a 5th round pick because he was just on a bad offense? Or is he going to ball out and end up being a lock in the 2nd round or even late 1st round? I think like my money is going on the fact that he's going to increase in ADP next year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have him, I think, as my dynasty wide receiver 6 right now, which he's actually above Hopkins. Where do you have him in dynasty?
I actually don't do dynasty rankings. I mean, I would pick him over Hopkins in dynasty for sure. I think he's right next to Chris Godwin, if I, thinking off the top of my head. So certainly a top 5 in that category, but no strict rankings in that regard.
Okay, so after DJ Moore was David Johnson at the 3.03, Mike Evans, James Conner, and then Leonard Fournette just taken out from underneath me at the 3.06. Allen Robinson also taken out from under me at the 3.07. So I had to settle for Adam Thielen at the 3.08. I debated on going quarterback there. I debated really long and hard about if I wanted to do Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, but because this is a Twitter mock draft, I'm almost certain one of them is going to come back to me. So that's my play. So I went with Adam Thielen. His PPR upside is amazing in that offense. We don't even know who their wide receiver 2 is. It's BC according to the team right now. So I like his upside. And after Adam Thielen was Juju Smith-Schuster, Chris Carson, Odell Beckham, and then Lamar Jackson comes off the board. That was a great pick at 3.12.
Yeah, I think you have the right idea that Mahomes might make it all the way back. It'll be interesting to see what these 3 teams in front of you do. Because another way you can get advantages in fantasy is if you buy into stacks. And so a Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce stack, I would have loved that if you did that in the late 3rd round. And then you just work on depth at running back and wide receiver the rest of your draft. I'm actually I know with the volume argument for Adam Thielen, he has a great chance to be a wide receiver 1, but that's actually a pick I personally will push back on, because I think with the injury he saw last year, the pace he was at before the injury in a run first offense. Granted, Stephon Diggs was taking away targets, but now Stephon Diggs is also not taking away coverage. So it could be hard for, Thielen to go up against the double. He might have lost a step after the injury. He's a guy where I look at and if I would rather not draft him and be wrong than draft him and have him be a complete bust, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. So who do you like at the 3.08? Because I was looking at Amari Cooper. He's someone that I know is more boom or bust, but with the Cowboys offense, I expect it to be explosive. Odell Beckham was also up there. I would rather have both Odell and Amari Cooper over Juju. And then Cooper Kupp went after Amari Cooper at the 4.01. Jonathan Taylor just went at the 4.03 by Adam Hutchinson. Come on, Adam. What's up with that?
Well, he's probably stealing that because he knows you like him. I personally, at the 308, I wouldn't hate Chris Carson there. I think if you do want to go heavy RB and it's past those 14 guys, I think Chris Carson and James Conner are my, next two that kind of round out the top. Well, yeah, top like 13 to 15. So they're in that conversation as well. I would have loved to get Allen Robinson there. Obviously, went a pick before you, and I've got him as my wide receiver 8. But I think Juju's interesting too because he's got the volume. Yeah, he was hurt last year, but he's a lot younger and could see a lot more passing volume on a whole, like within the offense, than Adam Thielen can. So I've got Juju above Thielen.
Gotcha. And I can definitely respect that because they're all in very similar tier to me. Like that's that sort of ugly wide receiver tier that I'd prefer not to be. That's why I actually chose this spot because I consider it to be that really awful draft spot that you don't want to be picking at the 1.08. So just to recap our teams right now, I'm actually on the clock. I have Derrick Henry, Travis Kelce, Adam Thielen, and let me go ahead and add Patrick Mahomes to my team. So
yes,
Patrick Mahomes.
Okay. I was like, you have to hit this stack right now.
And then Andrew has Christian McCaffrey, DeAndre Hopkins, and DJ Moore. So what are you thinking going into your next pick at the end of the 4th? Are you expecting to grab another running back? Because this is a start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 1 tight end, 2 flexes, and 1 defense. So what are you thinking at your next pick?
And this is whole PPR too, right?
Yes, whole PPR, 4 point per touchdown.
Okay, so a little bit more on the 0 running back, or in this case, modified 0 running back theory here. I've already got 1 running back slot locked in, and I can play a maximum of 4 wide receivers in this lineup. You get points for catches. I've got the best pass catching running back in the league on my team. I'm going to hammer wide receiver again, like wide receiver. And I'm going to do it because I think there's a lot of great guys that will fall to that spot that have upside to be, wide receiver 1s or definitive, like in the top 15, top 20. So that's my goal here. Mark Andrews was taken, so I'm not looking at tight end. I could consider quarterback if I think, like talking about stacks, if you want to do Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins together, I could see myself doing that. But specifically because there's 2 flexes in this lineup, I'm going to go wide receiver. And then when it comes back around, and when we get to it, I'll bring it up. At some point, I'm going to have to start hitting that running back depth really hard.
Yeah, and it's starting to get a little bit ugly for running back. So I completely understand where you're at. Like after I picked Patrick Mahomes at the 4.05, Melvin Gordon was picked at 4.06, then Robert Woods, then Cam Akers. So the top running backs right now are Mark Ingram, Devin Singletary, Raheem Mostert. We currently have David Montgomery there, but he's injured. Kareem Hunt, Ronald Jones, and then DeAndre Swift, who's also injured. So that's a very ugly tier of like 6, 7 running backs that I would definitely agree with you and go with. I don't think Calvin Ridley's going to make it back to you. That sucks, but maybe he will. AJ Brown just went. Yeah, AJ Brown 4.09. So Calvin Ridley's there. DK Metcalf, DJ Chark, Tyler Lockett, Terry McLaurin. Even Keenan Allen's a pretty good guy. T.Y. Hilton, Cortland Sutton, Marquise Brown, all of those guys I would rather take a chance on than go for one of these running backs. Oh, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, you went Chark 1 pick ahead of me, Calvin Ridley. And I've heard some volume arguments against Calvin Ridley, but he's another guy like DJ Moore who has balled out in his 1st and 2nd years and I think can continue to improve. That's a 600-plus pass attempt offense, and it's an absolute lock for it. I would be okay with taking Ridley even over Juju. So if you took him in the 3rd round over Adam Thielen, like Calvin Ridley's right up there on like fringe wide receiver 1 status for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. The Dynasty Theory podcast did their own projections, and they had Calvin Ridley as a wide receiver 1 with Julio. And I believe you had Calvin Ridley as the wide receiver 19, which is excellent value. And then after Calvin Ridley at the 4.11, T.Y. Hilton at the 4.12, Tyler Lockett at the 5.01, which I like Tyler Lockett over DK Metcalf. What do you think, Andrew?
I do like Tyler Lockett over DK Metcalf. one of our writers at the Undroppables, Vivek Iyer, at Fantasy and Sport, he wrote he wrote our Seattle Seahawks offseason breakdown. And when he looked at Lockett, he had like a near perfect or like an absolutely crazy quarterback rating when throwing to Lockett, Russell Wilson, that is. And so when you have a connection like that, it's very similar to, in my mind, like Russell Wilson and Doug Baldwin, where they had the mind meld going and they were just automatic when the play broke down. So I like him. I think his injury in the middle of the season is kind of what torpedoed his production for the year. He was like wide receiver 3 before that, like the first 8 weeks of the season. So I'm a big fan of Lockett, and he's in my top 15 receivers as well. And a guy that I've been increasing on, particularly because of my pod after touchdown co-host Sam Hoppen. He's been gassing this guy up a lot, and it's who I'm taking in the 5th round. Terry McLaurin as my wide receiver 4, and I love that wide receiver core right now.
I do too. Terry McLaurin's going to be a PPR monster. I could see him getting maybe 120, 130 targets, pushing for 80 to 90 receptions. And I know everybody's like, the Washington football team sucks, but if you get the players that get the volume, that's who you want on your team. And Terry McLaurin right there, wide receiver, like you drafted him around wide receiver like 22-ish. He, again, could be a high-end wide receiver too. And I even like him over T.Y. Hilton and even Tyler Lockett, just based off of the amount of work that he's going to get on the Washington football team.
Yeah, his target ceiling is insane. Their new offensive coordinator, I believe, is Scott Turner, which is Norv Turner's son, and I think he's a lot more, pass happy than most of the typical coordinators that are run first. So I know I believe he was the offensive coordinator for the Panthers last year, and that did great things for DJ Moore on a bad team. And so I think that will, bear a lot of fruit for McLaurin, and Haskins can do a lot to improve as well and help him.
Yep, I agree. Haskins is one of those guys that I think can have a good year, but I don't know if the record's going to show how much he improves. So I could see the Washington football team moving on from him potentially, but it all does depend on that record, because if Washington's that 1st overall pick again or 2nd overall pick, I could see them moving on, versus if somehow Haskins can win 5 or 6 games, which I went on a different podcast and we did projections, and the Washington football team only won 3 games, 3 for 13, and they were tied for like 1st place. So, and that was just looking at the matchups, which obviously it's not perfect way to do it, but it just makes it to where if you start looking at that, you're like, he's someone in Dynasty makes me a little bit nervous, but still, it's one of those things that if you can get Terry McLaurin or even Haskins in a Superflex redraft league, why not?
Yeah, and I mean, even worst case scenario there, if you think, Haskins just can't cut it and the Ohio State connection there doesn't work, they have a veteran in Alex Smith waiting in the wings. And I know that that's a long shot right now, but there was some buzz about it when he got cleared for football activities recently. And I think there is, when you think about range of outcomes or possible timelines that we could go through, there's a sliding door moment where Haskins gets benched and Alex Smith becomes comeback player of the year in this offense. And that is a huge opportunity for Terry McLaurin. I think it's certainly better than the quarterback situation in Chicago. And I love Allen Robinson just as much as, Adam Hutchinson and the Bears fan in this mock draft. But I think that the quarterback room in Washington might actually be better.
Yeah, I can definitely see an argument for that, because we haven't seen Nick Foles. We saw him win a Super Bowl, we saw him bring a team to a Super. No, he won it. Yeah,
he won it with the Patriots. Nick Foles has had some hot streaks in his time, but he's never put a full season together where he's just like, a QB. He's not a Patrick Mahomes. He's not Lamar Jackson. So it's like, what kind of straws are we grasping at with Nick Foles as a quarterback in the Bears offense? And they've already got, their running back, David Montgomery's injured. I think that doesn't make things any easier for them. And so, that's going to be tough offense to project, but, you have a lot of interesting variety on your team here, man.
Super funky.
It'll be interesting to see what you do with the value at the in the mid-late rounds, because we're just finishing up the 5th round here.
Yeah, so going back to your pick, you picked Terry McLaurin 5.02, and then Keenan Allen went 5.03, then Zach Ertz. Will Fuller was a surprising pick at 5.05 over DK Metcalf and Cortland Sutton. And then I had a tough choice. I was between Marquise Brown and Mark Ingram, and I decided to go for that running back high upside pick. He has potential to get a ton of touchdowns. I know J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are right behind him, but I think Mark Ingram can hold him off for one more year, be able to score a lot of points. If this was an actual league, it probably would bite me in the butt for the playoffs. So that is one concern for picking Mark Ingram. But I went Mark Ingram 5.08, and then Marquise Brown went right after 5.09, which I actually really like that pick, even in a PPR league. And then we have some rookies going. DeAndre Swift, 5.10, and then we have a one-year pro in Devin Singletary, 5.11, and then J.K. Dobbins at 5.12, which that to me seems a little bit early for J.K. Dobbins. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, J.K. Dobbins has been balling out at camp for, everything I've heard. I think that maybe we're hating on Mark Ingram a tad too much because he's in one of the best rushing offenses in the league, and he just happens to be 30 years old. I mean, he's definitely injury prone. He has had some, longer injuries in past seasons with the Saints. But if you're looking at Dobbins at this turn, like the 5-6 turn, that guy's not coming back to you. And so if you really believe in him as an upside running back for later on in the season, like it's Wecklin's, his sleeper name is Wecklin. It's his 3rd running back on his roster. So if you are, planning on that upside for later in the season, you got to get him now.
Yeah, and that's a very good point with on the turns. Like in Scott Fishbowl, I was the 1.01. And so one thing that was actually really refreshing and nice is I was able to set my tiers up. And with that, it makes it to where you don't even really worry about. Like I set up my QB and my tight end tiers and then just sort of saw what happened with running backs and receivers. And it made it to where it was just easy to sort of move around the draft because, like you said, you know that J.K. Dobbins is not coming back to me. There is no way he's coming back. So if I want him on my team for that potential upside, I have to take him now. Mm-hmm. So after J.K. Dobbins was Devontae Parker at 6.01, Darren Waller 6.02, Ronald Jones 6.03, and then Stephon Diggs, which he was the one guy that I was looking at as a potential high upside guy for the Bills. So I've officially hated the 1.08 draft spot. I think it is the worst. But, you got to keep trucking. You got to keep looking at it. And, this is tough. I'm debating between Raheem Mostert, Michael Gallup, Jarvis Landry, and I went ahead and put Tyler Boyd, even though for me he's below them. So this is tough because Michael Gallup has limited – well, he has wide receiver 2 upside, but there's no way he can jump into that wide receiver 1 status. Jarvis Landry's a steady wide receiver 2, and then Raheem Mostert has potential on the team, but we don't know exactly what the 49ers are going to do at running back. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with my guns and pick the guy that came to my mind first. And – oh, man, I am not a super big fan of this pick. Like, I'm letting the clock – I have 30 seconds right now. I'm trying to keep talking to keep the podcast going. David Montgomery right there, if he wasn't hurt, I would have loved him there. So I'm going to go ahead and
– Don't milk it too long, my guy. If he's the only guy you like, you got to take him, right? I forgot if you – honestly, I forgot if you even said his name already.
I'm going to go with Michael Gallup.
And you had to hit wide receiver there. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, you're good. You're completely correct. I had to hit wide receiver. I needed that wide receiver too. Michael Gallup, for me, out of the wide receivers, has the most upside potential. There's obviously Brandon Cooks there, but I'd rather take Michael Gallup, who the Cowboys offense I expect to be elite. One thing I just realized, there has not been a quarterback drafted since I drafted Mahomes in the middle of the 4th. So there's some excellent quarterback value. Like, honestly, if Dak went back to me at the 7.08 and I didn't have Patrick Mahomes, that'd be a fantastic pick. The other wide receivers that were around were A.J. Green, which I'm just staying away. Julian Edelman, he's an interesting guy, but more later for me. Tyler Boyd, he has potential, but again, I think if A.J. Green is around, both Tyler Boyd and A.J. Green will be affected. Brandon Cooks obviously has the concussion issues. Jarvis Landry's consistent, but he's someone I debated may come back to me. I doubt it with you in the draft, Andrew. And then there's Debo and Deontay Johnson. Both are dealing with some injuries. Marvin Jones, excellent upside. So there's all those guys that are just interesting picks. So after Michael Gallup, Kareem Hunt went 6.06. I like that pick. He was someone that I sort of put up there with Raheem Mostert, but it's just one of those things that you either go one way or the other. You think Kareem Hunt's going to equal Nick Chubb. A lot of people think that, or that Kareem Hunt's going to take a step back from Nick Chubb. And then the next pick was David Montgomery at 6.07. That pick I can get behind as my wide receiver or running back 3 that has RB2 potential in the middle of the 6. That's a great pick.
Yeah, that's a good flex or a bye week fill in once he gets healthy. I hope that he, Adam Hutchinson's looked at it a little bit. I hope that he doesn't have a high probability of re-injuring that groin strain. But, his ADP has become depressed for a reason. And so if you're willing to take on that little bit of risk for some depth and combo of both talent and opportunity, then that's what you go for it. Like, it's the same argument with Deebo Samuel at this point, because he's got that Jones fracture. He could easily, come up lame in a game if, sorry, I'm on the clock here. He could come up lame, Deebo Samuel could, in a game and then just leave. And so that would be bad if he's in your starting lineup. But if you're getting him in the 8th or 9th round, like, that's good value for a guy who would be the de facto wide receiver 1 on the 49ers. So same situation with David Montgomery. The risk is built in. I'm on the clock, like I mentioned. If Michael Gallup would have fallen me, I'd be hard pressed not to take him as my 5th wide receiver. But obviously I only have 1 running back so far. I'm going to start hitting some depth there, because I know that, this Twitter draft is going to keep plucking running backs from what's available. And so I'm going to get another pass catcher, James White. He has the most defined role in the Patriots offense. And so I think he's a great option for my RB2 there. And I'm not exactly sure yet what I'm going to do at this 7th round pick.
I love that James White pick. He's someone that, he's your RB2, and he could be an RB2 in the league pretty easily. Mm-hmm. So after David Montgomery was picked at 6.07, it was AJ Green at 6.08, then Raheem Mostert, Jordan Howard, then James White, which I would have wanted James White over Raheem Mostert and Jordan Howard, honestly. I know Raheem Mostert may have a little bit of more upside, but I am super concerned with the 49ers, and I know we have the Ball Blast girls are really all over Raheem Mostert, and I still have concerns. So after James White, there's Evan Ingram, 6.12, which I think that's a solid upside pick right there. Dak Prescott, the 3rd QB, finally drafted in the 7th round. What are you thinking, Andrew?
I'm thinking that Patrick Mahomes pick is still really good because it's in the 4th round, but the quarterbacks didn't fly off the board. So I know that's something that Paulie Sleepers talked about on one of your previous episodes, quarterback value. Like, you didn't really get that out of that pick there, which sucks. But I'm going to bite the bullet on quarterback too, because like I said, positional advantages are what we're looking for. I'm also looking to grab a stack here to help get some week winning lineups throughout the season. And so Kyler Murray's the pick. He has a perfect combination of rushing floor and passing / rushing upside. And I've got DeAndre Hopkins on my team. And so I love that option there in, a guy that we're really hoping takes the next step. I do not like taking him in the 5th or 6th round, but 7th round, I think I got to take him there.
Yeah, and I love that stack too with Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. And Kyler Murray, I think, should be, in that argument for the QB 4 to 6 range between Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson. I really do prefer Dak Prescott over Kyler Murray on the Cowboys, by a decent margin. So I still like your pick, Kyler Murray 7.02, and then it was Tyler Boyd next, and then we have a little QB run going, Deshaun Watson. I think we may see Russell Wilson go, and then we'll probably have a little break because the next QB on the sleeper ADP is Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Tom Brady. So this may show everybody, if you're in a Twitter league, just wait on QB for ever because I picked Patrick Mahomes 4.05. Another QB was not taken until 2.5 rounds later, which I would have rather waited and had Russell Wilson in the 7th round versus Patrick Mahomes in the middle of the 4th.
Yeah, in a league that I just drafted last night for Pod After Touchdown, we're in a podcasters league, and we actually got Carson Wentz in the 10th round, like the 10:01. So people were waiting on quarterback like crazy there too. And that was a more balanced draft because my co-host Sam and our producer Garner, they like to get some running back depth. So we went running back. Then I hit like 4 wide receivers in a row, then 2 running backs, and then I think we went like a tight end and a quarterback or something like that. We have that Twitter thread on at Pod After TD right now. But it's exactly what you said. I mean, even with like you've got Lamar Jackson, you've got Patrick Mahomes, and then with those next 4 guys, I actually would generally prefer to get the last of those 4. So whether it's whoever's the last one on the board would be ideal. But when you're stuck on a turn, you gotta kind of pick if you want a quarterback, like get the guy you like the most.
Yeah, I agree. I'm actually surprised Russell Wilson hasn't been picked yet because after Deshaun Watson at 7.04, we've had 1 pick go so far. Deebo Samuel, still waiting on 1 pick. Oh, Drew Brees, 7.06, which over Russell Wilson's a little spicy, but what do you think?
Man, I can get the receipt if you want, but I said last year Drew Brees would not be a top 20 quarterback, and he wasn't because I got lucky because he got injured. And so, points per game, I would not have gotten that right for points per game. He is great. They're going to keep going for, they're pushing for the Super Bowl, and they've got Emmanuel Sanders. So that's a great addition from certainly an NFL standpoint. I mean, the thing for me is that watching Russell Wilson, like I would have to pick him first. He's got some rushing upside. This is a 4-point passing touchdown league. And so it's hard for me to pick Breeze over Russ in almost any format, just because of, even if Pete Carroll doesn't let Russ cook like we all want him to, I think his efficiency is just too high to ignore it.
Yeah, and I do agree. I would go Russell Wilson over it, but I will say this is my older brother actually is in this draft list, and that was who picked Drew Brees, and he has been a Drew Brees fan for years. In every single draft, he tries to get Drew Brees on his team, and it's because like 2 or 3 years ago, it's worked out great. I mean, even last year, like you said, points per game, it worked out great. And I can definitely see an argument for him being the QB7, and he could finish above these quarterbacks depending on if he has that elite year, which a lot of his production last year was from just a crazy high touchdown percentage, a crazy high efficiency, and he could potentially do that with a healthy Alvin Kamara. Maybe Jared Cook is still relevant, but it does make me a little bit nervous. But then at the same time, we've seen QBs fall so far. It's Drew Brees in the 7th round still.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say about Wilson is, they did bring in Jamal Adams on defense. So if the Seahawks defense is better, that's going to allow the Seahawks to run more. And that's maybe getting a little too meta for our fantasy offense's purpose, but it's something to consider. And now like 7-10, Matt Ryan just went. Russell Wilson's still on the board. So I see it. Like I can definitely see it, but he's also got a rushing like he can get a little chunk of points from rushing that I think these guys are missing out on with the passing here, particularly with Breeze, because I think that the Saints do like to run more with Kamara and Latavius Murray. I don't hate it with Matt Ryan because they're going to throw 600 times. Like we said that already this hour. But Russell Wilson still on the board at 7-11. That's the big takeaway right now.
Yep, I agree. So Drew Brees went 7.06. Jarvis Landry sniped right in front of me, 7.07. So then I had to settle for Tariq Cohen, which I actually think he has similar potential to James White, especially with David Montgomery's injury to start the season. He may not be able to do his 2018 numbers where he was, I think, a running back 1 that year, or at least a high-end RB2. So that was 7.08. And then Brandon Cooks went next, 7.09. And I was debating Brandon Cooks at that spot because of his potential upside. I know he does have the concussion concerns, which does concern me. But whenever you're drafting him as the think this is a wide receiver 4 now. I think we've had at least 36 wide receivers drafted. So that type of potential there is really nice. And then we have Adam Hutchinson picking Matt Ryan instead of Russell Wilson. What are you doing, Adam? No, just playing. He's probably going for that high upside. He has Julio, so that was probably what it was, the stack actually right there. And then a surprise couple of picks, actually. Julian Edelman, 7.11, and then Deshaun Jackson, 7.12, which with the news with Jalen Reagor missing probably a couple of games, I can see the upside of Deshaun Jackson, but I don't know if it'll be for a long term, the full season. But he is the wide receiver 3, so that's not a bad spot. And he also picked J.K. Dobbins, so maybe he's expecting J.K. Dobbins to come on more in the middle of the season, and then Deshaun Jackson to maybe level off. And then another surprising pick for me, Emmanuel Sanders, which we are getting into that like ugly wide receiver tier, but there definitely are some wide receivers I'd rather have over them for myself. Like I take a chance on Marvin Jones over honestly everybody that wasn't Jarvis Landry. Honestly, Marvin Jones over Brandon Cooks, Julian Edelman, Deshaun Jackson, Emmanuel Sanders. I also think that Jamison Crowder in a PPR league is an interesting guy to talk about right here, which he's a bargain in almost every draft. Deontay Johnson's hurt right now, which makes me a little bit concerned. I haven't really heard much about him, but still, it's one of those things that there's potential. And then real quick, we have after Emmanuel Sanders, Marlon Mack 8.02, Hayden Hurst, Russell Wilson finally comes off the board 8.04. And then I'm going to take my guy I already mentioned, Marvin Jones Jr., who he's actually had pretty similar production to Kenny Golladay. I still think Kenny Golladay is the one by far, but Marvin Jones can provide some weekly winning upside, and he's currently he's my flex. So he's my last flex guy.
Yeah, Marvin Jones is a good pick there. I am one of many people in the fantasy community that just continue to sleep on Marvin Jones. I think he's, not like the sexiest pick out there, but he has a lot of touchdown upside. So I don't hate that pick. I think that, Deontay Johnson is just a guy that got picked right after Marvin Jones and has gotten a lot more buzz. And so I think just by that, nature of that buzz that I would have picked Johnson over Marvin Jones. But after that, we got 3 running backs in a row. And these are all guys I would have loved to hit at the 8-11. Antonio Gibson has been getting some pop. Zach Moss as well. Matt Breida, I think, could end up being even better than Jordan Howard in Miami's offense. And so there's one pick before I go. One thing I will say here is, no matter what your draft strategy is, and if you go 0 RB, you might be forced to take running backs at this point. And that's actually a point where you have to steer into the skid and say, after the 7th or 8th round, you can throw ADP out the window. Like, get who you want. Like, I think that it's really something that you look back on the draft after week 10 or whatever it is. And no one's going to care that you fucked up your 9th round or your 10th round draft pick. They're going to be laughing that you picked someone like Le'Veon Bell in the 2nd round. No offense to Bomb Smoothie, but if Le'Veon Bell busts, people are going to be talking about that, or when Le'Veon Bell held out in the 1st round and someone took him. So get your guys and look for upside too, because if these guys fall flat early, they could end up being off your team because you're going to play the waiver wire anyway. A guy I love who's not necessarily the highest upside pick, but he's a great 0 RB target in my mind, is still on the board at 8-11, and it's Phillip Lindsay. And Phillip Lindsay's an incumbent, just like Marlon Mack, like Kerryon Johnson and others, but he's going a lot later than those guys. And he was an undrafted guy. He hasn't been the best in the passing game, but he's had back-to-back seasons with 1,000 yards rushing. And I've heard whispers that Melvin Gordon isn't being, the best in terms of health or getting in shape for training camp. He said he wasn't going to miss a camp again last year after holding out, but I still think it's, going to be a fairly even split there. And I like having Lindsay as the incumbent as like a flex level running back.
Yeah, Lindsay's someone I've been growing on. At first, I was sort of anti-Melvin Gordon and Lindsay, but after those more recent reports with Lindsay and also seeing how Lady's going, like we had my pick Marvin Jones, and then at the 8.06, Deontay Johnson, which if Deontay Johnson was healthy, I would have picked him above Marvin Jones. I believe he still isn't practicing. I haven't looked into it a ton, but then Antonio Gibson, 8.07. I like that pick. Zach Moss, 8.08. I really like that pick. Matt Breida, 8.09. I like that pick as well. And then Jamison Crowder, that made me upset. I was shaking my fist at the screen, 8.10. And then, as Andrew was saying, he had Phillip Lindsay at 8.11, Chris Herndon, 8.12, CeeDee Lamb, the surprise pick at 9.01. And then Andrew's on the clock. Looking at who is there, I bet you wish Jalen Reagor was healthy. Potentially, maybe. We have Tevin Coleman, Alexander Madison, Latavius Murray, Kerryon Johnson, Damian Harris, Chase Edmonds, Sony Michel, A.J. Dillon, and Darrell Henderson. So, Andrew, what are you thinking?
So normally I love Christian Kirk at this spot. He's going into his third year and he suffered some injuries in the past, but he's shown some pretty good efficiency in his career thus far. So normally I'd go for him, but I've already got, Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. It gives me a little trepidation of putting the eggs all in the same basket there. And so, I've already got a solid 4 guys, and I'm really curious about, like I said, high upside. Tyreek Hill has been dealing with an injury lately, and he had some injury issues last year. So I'm going to hit Mecole Hardman here. It's been like a love-hate pick for me, but I've done it in a home league already. And the big thing that I see with Mecole Hardman is the efficiency that he had last year should earn him greater opportunity going into this year. And it will be a quick, you got to get him here like a 9th, 10th round. Otherwise, someone will take him. I think we'll learn quickly if he's going to be involved in the offense or not. I heard from training camp that he's no longer doing return duties, which means they're going to get him involved in the pass game more. It's outside of Sammy Watkins, of all players, he is the cheapest option in the Chiefs pass game. And so that's why I like grabbing a piece there.
Yeah, I think Mecole's a nice high upside piece, and also, like you already mentioned, you can always just drop him if he doesn't work out. And that's one thing with any of these picks, the 9th round and later, really, you can always end up dropping them. And with some of these picks, like we just had after Phillip Lindsay, Chris Herndon, CeeDee Lamb 9.01, and then Mecole Hardman 9.02, which I actually would prefer Mecole over CeeDee Lamb personally, because I see more high upside potential for Mecole Hardman. Then Alexander Madison, the ultimate backup running back, 9.03, Darius Slayton 9.04, which I actually like to take whichever Giants wide receiver is the cheapest in the draft for me, because I don't really see a benefit for one person or the other. And then we have Josh Allen 9.05, and then Jerry Jeudy 9.06.
Yeah, I like that you bring up Mecole over CD, because I've been on the fence with both of them. I think that the Cowboys pass offense is really spicy this off season as well. So there's been a lot of hype around CeeDee Lamb and being able to produce with all the vacated targets they have there. Darius Slayton is actually a guy that I've been fading a lot if I'm going to go Giants wide receiver. If I'm going to pick a piece from that offense, Barkley obviously, but I'd rather have Daniel Jones distributing it to everyone, and Evan Ingram as a good high upside piece if I can get him in the right ADP. But I've been fading Slayton particularly because he earned half of his fantasy points on his 8 touchdown plays last year. And so, I mean, if you think he's that good and they've got that connection, it's going to repeat, then go for it. But that is in my mind, a low probability gamble. And so I would rather go for, Sterling Shepard, I would assume is projected to be the one. Surprisingly, watching highlights from Golden Tate last year, when he was healthy, he was making a lot of plays in that offense. And so Giants are really interesting. I do like Daniel Jones as a late round QB if you're just going to go for running back and wide receiver through the beginning of your draft.
Yeah, Daniel Jones is a nice one, especially in a draft like this, to where you could probably end up getting him in that 13th round. And he is someone I would say that can fit into that middle QB1 tier that I couldn't even think of someone before. So after Jerry Jeudy, 9.06, Damian Harris, 9.07, I went ahead and I looked at my team and I was like, I'm a little thin at running back, and I actually really like the receivers that I have. So I went for a high upside running back in Latavius Murray. He is arguably one of the best replacement running backs. He dominated last year when he was on the field. It sort of sucks whenever you're taking players like that over someone like a Christian Kirk that went right after, but I'll take that upside potential and keep that on my team for the full season. So then Christian Kirk, 9.09, Mike Williams 9.10, Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski 9.12, and he actually was drafted over Tyler Higbee and Hunter Henry, which I would not have done that. I am fading Gronk completely. And then Curtis Samuel 10.01.
Curtis Samuel is an interesting pick here because I think you could honestly get him, especially in your home leagues, in the 15th or 14th round of your drafts. And so I find it to be honestly a reach for Curtis Samuel. I mean, I don't want to over-evaluate this guy's team, but it wouldn't be my cup of tea. I think that he's definitely overlooked, and he's a post-hype sleeper because he got so much hype last year, and he could easily be the second option. He had a ton of air yards in that offense, and I think for Curtis Samuel, and it's a good comparison to DJ Moore, is like Curtis Samuel needed a better quarterback, and Kyle Allen just wasn't good enough for him. DJ Moore is so good that it didn't matter that Kyle Allen was his quarterback. And so I'm going to keep pounding the table for DJ Moore, but I think there's opportunity for Curtis Samuel as well. I just wouldn't overpay for him. I know we said throw ADP out the window, get your guys. So I totally support that too, but I have not seen him drafted that early in a long time.
Yeah, that seemed pretty early to me, especially with Robbie Anderson there as well. And I think he will get some targets as well, which will hurt Curtis Samuel's upside potential. But after Curtis Samuel was Henry Ruggs, which I think Henry Ruggs was also picked a little bit early. Golden Tate is someone I would have liked over both Ruggs and Samuel. He's not the sexy pick for anybody, especially if you've done Dynasty. But I think Golden Tate, like we've already mentioned, has some upside on that team. And then Preston Williams is someone that interests me. He's just one of those guys that I know he's post ACL tear. I had Adam come on the podcast to talk about Preston Williams, and now he is fading Preston Williams this year because of that just issue with him potentially not coming back 100%. And I can see that argument for sure. In the middle of the 10th, that starts to get to that ADP to where he does have some upside potential, especially if he can turn it on towards like the 8th week of the season or anything like that, because he is his 6th wide receiver. So he's just depth right now, which it sort of sucks because he only has 2 running backs. So I don't know exactly what the plan is there, but we'll see how it is. He has a nice little team going. This is Mateo Loco. He has Miles Sanders, Aaron Jones, Juju, Mark Andrews, Marquise Brown, Stephon Diggs, Brandon Cooks, Russell Wilson, Christian Kirk, and Preston Williams. So our wide receiver heavy, running back light. After Preston Williams, I went and got the guy that we were already talking about, Sterling Shepard. As I said, I will take the Giants receiver that is last. If that was Golden Tate right there, it would have been Golden Tate. If it was Darius Slayton, it would have been Darius Slayton.
Yeah, that's great value-based drafting there. And going back to Mateo's team, I actually kind of love it the more I look at it, just because he hit running back. Like we said, he got 2 of the top 14 guys. And then he went with a lot of high upside wide receivers, because I feel like a lot of those guys are boom bust, like Marquise Brown, Stephon Diggs, or we characterize them as boom bust, but any one of these guys could become a consistent week-to-week producer. And when we talk about the later rounds, like 9 and 10, what we're looking at currently, I put Mecole Hardman, Henry Ruggs, Preston Williams all kind of in a similar tier where any of them could become, an absolute smash at their ADP, or they could just be, you don't know what week they're going to go off. And so it makes it tough to start them.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think about that Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown pick? Because I have problems with that just because I find it difficult for both of these guys to be at their peak while the other one's at their peak as well. Because Mark Andrews really dominated on the touchdown department, and he was getting targeted when he was on the field. He had the highest hog rate, which is getting targeted the amount of targets per route run.
Yeah.
While Marquise Brown missed some games, I think he's going to dig into that Mark Andrews upside, but that still doesn't mean Mark Andrews can't be the tight end 3. I actually would rather have like Zach Ertz as his ADP of the 5.04 personally. It's just an interesting little stack because for me, whenever I'm drafting, I want to pick the opposite guys because then I'm betting on my guy that I drafted versus sort of clumping everybody together.
Yeah, I actually drafted both of those guys in a best ball league yesterday. Underdog Fantasy is a new platform that I really like how it looks like, and it's just, games where you deposit money and you can, win big time. So that's a little plug for them, even though I'm not getting paid for that. But It's funny because I think the argument for the Ravens is the passing volume has to go up. And if Lamar Jackson's going to be anywhere near as efficient as he was last year, then both Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown can do really well because they can both do really well on lower volume. Their efficiency could go through the roof. I do agree. Like Brown, if he's healthy, 16 games should eat into Mark Andrews a bit, and Ertz could be a better pick than Mark Andrews in PPR, especially because Mark Andrews is going to produce, just not on as many receptions. So that's I don't hate it, but I don't love it either in terms of stacking Ravens receivers.
Yeah, and so after Sterling Shepard at 10.05, which was my pick, Tevin Coleman 10.06, I thought he may fall to me. Chase Edmonds 10.07, AJ Dillon 10.08, which that pick surprises me some because I would rather have some higher upside guys, like even like a Kerryon Johnson, because DeAndre Swift is currently hurt. I think Kerryon Johnson can have some nice sneaky upside to start the season, or even like a Tony Pollard, Boston Scott, Duke Johnson. And then if Keyshawn Vaughn is there, like around 14, 15, he's someone that I'm interested in, because I know a lot of people have just pushed him to the wayside, but we have seen Bruce Arians not use his running backs early on and then start using them more as the season comes on. And I think that he was drafted for a reason. I don't think he's going to be washed up this whole season. So I expect him to come in and at least do something, but it has to be late because there is that concern there. So after A.J. Dillon at 10.08, Sony Michel 10.09, which Sony Michel and Damian Harris, I have no idea what to do with, especially PPR. They're like two guys that if they're there in like the 13th round, I may pick them. But like Sony Michel's upside in a PPR league, and I wrote an article about Sony Michel and how I saw his potential if Stidham was the running back, If Stidham was the quarterback, then Sony Michel could be a high-end RB3. And that's his upside. That was like best potential. That was looking at previous stats with whenever Matt Castle was the quarterback, whenever Brady was suspended, it was Jacoby Brissett and a couple other guys were the quarterbacks. So that was the highest upside in PPR. Now, if it goes half or non-PPR, then obviously the upside increases. But I just can't really get behind him at the middle of the 10th, which I drafted him in Scott Fishbowl at this point because of that increase in the half point per first down, which provides a little bit more upside, and it's half PPR. But what do you think, Andrew? That to me is just hard.
I've been targeting Damian Harris a lot, and a big reason is because he started over Josh Jacobs in college. He broke, as far as I know, he broke tons of records while he was there. And then Belichick goes ahead and drafts him like a year after they had drafted Sony Michel. So either Nick Saban and Bill Belichick don't know what they're doing in drafting Damian Harris or supporting this guy as a prospect, or Damian Harris is actually a really good football player and just hasn't gotten his opportunity yet. So that logic really speaks to me, and that's why I've been targeting him. Given the fact that Sony Michel's back at camp and, James White is there, it gives me a little more trepidation in taking him as early as the 9th round. I think that the ADP's gotten a little bit crazy on him, and I liked him as a 0 RB target before, but we've been hearing a lot of positive things. So that's one reason why it's actually better if you're in the Twitter fantasy world to draft earlier. Like draft earlier so you can get some of these guys that you believe in before the hype happens. And then you'll reap the rewards later.
Yeah, that's why you could do maybe like a best ball. That's another option for like something to where you can get drafts right away. So after Sony Michel was Hunter Henry at the 10.10, which I think is great value for Hunter Henry. Like, I like that value better than Travis Kelce, honestly, which I just keep looking at and I'm like, man, everybody just let tight ends and quarterbacks just fall off a cliff. And I love your pick of Kerryon Johnson. As I already mentioned, he has awesome upside to start the season for me because I don't see DeAndre Swift doing a ton, at least week 1. I know there's still talk that DeAndre Swift will have a role, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen there. And in the 10th round, that late 10th round with who's left, he has that upside potential to where he could help you win a week or two, and then you drop him and you grab the next up-and-coming running back. And then after that, it was Rashad Perryman. And then I'm going to go ahead and let the computer auto-pick because this guy isn't on. And then it was John Brown. And so now you're back up, Andrew.
Yeah, quick thing on Kerryon. I know people are hating the look of that knee brace, but I almost thought about taking him in the 9th round just based on positional need. Love that he came back to me at the 10th. So that's not a bad price to pay. And I have not drafted much of this guy at all. So I guess I'll give him some pop in a mock draft. I'm going to go Boston Scott here, a guy who catches passes, a guy who was successful with the Eagles last year. That situation's getting a little murky. I have some trepidation with this pick, but like I said, it is a mock. So I just get another guy that has, fill-in potential, especially if Miles Sanders misses a week.
Yeah, Boston Scott's someone I really like, especially for your team. And just to recap your team, Christian McCaffrey, great first pick. You got him at the 1.02. Then DeAndre Hopkins, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin. So that's 4 wide receivers. And then James White. So that was your running back 2. Kyler Murray as your stack quarterback, Phillip Lindsay, Mecole Hardman, Kerryon Johnson, and Boston Scott. So this would be like the stereotypical 0 RB team. I guess you technically would get rid of Christian McCaffrey, but then I feel like, would you typically like to grab a running back in the early rounds and go, quote, modified, or does it just depend how the draft falls? So you're a little bit more fluid, like everybody says.
You definitely have to stay water. And the way that there is so much depth at the wide receiver position, we actually talked about this a couple weeks ago. Like, what would your favorite pick be in a draft? On Pod After Touchdown, we discussed this. And I said, if you can be on the turn, like, that's great, because then you can hit 2 picks in succession. You don't have to worry about like playing the ADP game as much and trying to see which guy will fall back to you. But now that I see it more often and that I've done it more often, getting the first 4 picks this year, I love, because you do get one of those locked and loaded, like tier 1 running backs, and I'll take any of them. And then you can hammer wide receiver really hard and work on the rest of the positions later. So I love how this team's turned out. I know, Mateo chimed in and said that he's loving this team. So shout out to him. And I am punting on tight end, but I'll be curious to see how it ends as we get into the late 12th, early 13th round.
Honestly, with the tight ends left, I'm not super worried. Like, I'm not a Tyler Higbee fan, but where he's being drafted in the 11th and 12th, he has a ton of upside there. So Tyler Higbee, Jared Cook, Noah Fant, Austin Hooper, TJ Hawkinson, Mike Gesicki, Jonnu Smith. Probably staying away from Jack Doyle since he's hurt right now. Eric Ebron's a nice one. Blake Jarwin. There's just so many tight ends here. Yeah. I can just keep naming names for days. And so I honestly think you're fine. I expect you to take a tight end on the next turn. I debated on a tight end for my pick right now, which I just realized I'm on the clock. So let me go ahead and pick my guy. But yeah, tight end's interesting because I have Travis Kelce. So obviously I don't want to be doing a ton of draft capital, and I don't expect to start a tight end. And so that's where it sort of gets iffy to me because I love tight ends. And that's my weakness. I love tight ends. That's why you'll see me post about Dan Arnold and Logan Thomas, people that no one cares about. Yeah. But I'm just like, hey, if you're in a start 2 tight end league, you're in a tight end premium league, go ahead and grab him right now. And Logan Thomas actually ended up working out. At least he's having some Twitter hype. We'll see what happens in season. I don't expect him to be a tight end 1, maybe a tight end 2 with some weekly upside for like streaming, which that's like my tip top. Like, that's what I like him for, which I know everybody's taken the hype to a new extreme. And I think everybody expects him to be the new awesome thing and would draft him in like the 15th round of a redraft league. I'm like, please don't do that. Just please don't.
Well, it is crazy Higbee's fallen this far. And there goes Jonnu Smith, which is actually my guy when it comes to tight ends. His ADP and sleeper is insane. So I actually love getting him in the 10th or 11th round. I think he's the second best pass catching option on the Titans. So I am curious to see what tight ends end up falling to me, as we've got a couple guys that have doubled up on tight ends already, and I haven't grabbed one yet. And as I'm looking at this board and how many picks we have left, we have 4 picks left. I've got to get 2 more benches and a tight end. And we talked about, ideally if you can get Kelce or Kittle at the beginning, that's super helpful in 0 RB or modified. And like, if you're going true 0 RB where you're getting like 5 receivers in the first 7 rounds, you get a tight end and a quarterback, so you have no running backs, you got to get at least like 7 guys if the bench provides the opportunity to get 7 different like late round lottery tickets at running back to fill those 2 spots. Since I have McCaffrey, I'm probably going to only get 1 more running back and then double up on tight end, because like you said, like the tight end position looks very juicy this year. I think everyone wants all of these guys to break out. It's just a matter of, how are they going to stack out by the end of the year? Because only so many of them can be, tight end a tight end 1, or like what you were saying with Paulie a couple episodes ago, like tight ends 1 to tight end 6 are the actual like tight end 1s, and then you've got like tight end 2s after that. So like tight end 10 could be 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. And so that's why the premium on the guys we mentioned before are great, but now we're just shooting for upside.
Yeah, tight end's one of those positions I could see it having a resurgence this year, but you still have those teardrops. And so I think Travis Kelce, George Kittle will still have that massive increase in value, but you may just have a gigantic long tier that like tight end 8 to like tight end 18 is all relatively similar, but it's a higher score than what tight end 18 normally had. Like it could maybe be what Jason Witten had as the tight end 11 last year. And just to recap some picks, so you drafted Boston Scott 11.2, surprise pick actually, Brian Edwards 11.03, which I like him there because Tyrell Williams is hurt. He's going to play hurt, but still he's hurt. And then Jalen Reagor 11.04, that's a decent upside pick. You have him this team has him as his wide receiver 4. So that's decent. He has some running backs in front to go into flex. Paris Campbell 11.05, Alan Lazard 11.06, Tony Pollard, and then I drafted Brandon Ayuk at 11.08, which I actually would take Ayuk probably where the 10th round happened, the end of the 10th, start 11th with like Perryman and John Brown. I think if Reagor was healthy, then Reagor would be bounds and above Ayuk, but with Reagor injured, they're probably about equal. And then after Ayuk, Tyler Higbee, Jonnu Smith, and then we finally have our first defense, which this is about 2 rounds to 3 rounds later than most home league drafts would be with the San Francisco 49ers. And this is actually a discussion we're going to have in just a sec after I recap the picks, but when would you take a defense in here? So after San Francisco, TJ Hawkinson, a surprise pick in Darrington Evans, then Matthew Stafford at 12.2. We have a little double up in quarterback, which is interesting. Then we have Adam Hutchinson on the clock. So with the defenses, is there any point in like a Twitter league that you'd start looking at the defense to be like, I can actually get a decent advantage here by going one of those top end guys in like the 12th or the 13th? Or are you still just kind of fade them and just wait until maybe for you like the 13.02 and then you start a run?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we noticed earlier in this draft is you can't bank on a run happening. All these guys are free thinkers, and so that's tough to influence in a Twitter league. I wouldn't hate taking a defense early if you want to secure one of those guys. I think, finding those advantages of defense is important too. If you're in a home league, you got a defense, you got a kicker, trying to get the best guys so you can just lock and load them every week, especially if you don't want to worry about the position, that's completely fine. That makes complete sense to me. And I think the 49ers are a solid option just because they do have a week 11 bye. So you could play them for 10 weeks without even having to worry about them. There are some other some other defenses rather, that I like a bit more, particularly the Steelers, because I think they're a really young core. They did some crazy things last year with an awful offense that didn't do them any favors. And they balled out anyway. So, TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, Devin Bush, I love that trio there. And so I like going them. I think the Bills defense is great just by schedule alone. That's what the Patriots took advantage of last year. And I think that's kind of where the Bills could do that this year. And then I'll save. This will be a little bit of a tease, but I might wait until the very end for my defense, and I'll have some good late round picks for you guys there.
Sweet. So after Matthew Stafford, Jerick McKinnon at 12.03, which that's a pretty decent split. I actually picked Duke Johnson at 12.05, which I like over Jerick McKinnon for that potential upside. Joshua Kelly went in between at 12.04, and then Anthony Miller at 12.06. We may start having some auto picks happening, so that'll make it a little bit more chalk as we go through. But we'll keep this rolling. Yeah, for defense, I think if you start seeing the defenses getting faded into the 11th, 12th, and 13th round, I'm fine taking one of those high upside ones like the Steelers. They're one that I actually had in my queue all ready to go, debating on them for the 13th round, which I think you won't pick them, so I may get them there. But with the defense and the kickers, if you have people taking like a couple years ago, the Bears defense went in the 8th round. just don't do that to yourself. You can have guys like Deontay Johnson, Antonio Gibson, Zach Moss, Matt Breida, and instead get a couple of defenses. And after like 4 or 5 weeks, start looking at matchups, because the matchups are the key. That's like you mentioned the Steelers last year. Their matchups were fantastic at the end of the year. And they were a team that I actually was looking at to pick up in most leagues, and I did in one, and it helped me win the league. And then the other one, I waited just a week too long. Someone saw them. I couldn't trade for them. I was trying to trade some roster fodder for them. No one was biting. It made me very sad. So, yeah, defense is one of those things. If your team's stacked, like New England defense last year, I think trading some roster fodder for them, why not? But I would not send your flex guy for a defense, even if they're the New England defense who dominated.
Yeah, the New England defense is a defense I would actually highly recommend avoiding this year, because I know the Steelers are really efficient, but the Patriots defense was out of this world. They were, if you had them on your team, you made the playoffs pretty much. And they had so much turnover luck. They have a lot of guys on that starting lineup that have opted out this season. And I think it's, particularly significant compared to other defenses. And so I don't want to overdraft them. That's the main thing. Like you said, don't take the Patriots defense in the 9th round. And what's funny, because I know you want to address this too, maybe we can, get it into with the late round here, is what types of things can you do to, win the playoffs, like at the end of the season. Once I kind of know what my core team is, I don't hate having 2 defenses locked in like kind of rostering one for a week or 2 down the road. So you're actually adding them a week before. So you're beating the waiver wire. And so you don't have to overpay for them or anything like that, because you're playing those matchups and you want to be able to get those defenses that will be, great for the playoff run. And so I had some teams last year where I had both the Steelers defense and the Ravens defense. Just so I knew, like, okay, what matchups am I going to play at the end of the year? Because I pretty much already know who's in my running back, my wide receivers, my flex spot.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Like, one thing I mentioned, I had Andrew Hall on the podcast, and we talked through some strategies. And so a couple of those questions I brought in here is the importance of, if you have guys on your roster that you're never going to start, like an example is Jamison Crowder, then go ahead and get one of those high upside running backs and just put them on the bottom of your bench, because there's potential if someone gets hurt that you're going to have an awesome guy. And so with the running backs, get some awesome guys. Going ahead and going back to the draft, Duke Johnson, 12.05, Anthony Miller, 12.06, Jared Cook, I actually like that pick, 12.07, Blake Jarwin, 12.08, Nyheim Hines, Carson Wentz, and Andrew picked Noah Fant at 12.11, which I like Fant over Blake Jarwin. I can see an argument for Jared Cook over Fant, but the guy who drafted Jared Cook also got a nice little stack with Drew Brees and Jared Cook. So did you like that Fant pick? I saw your face change.
Yeah, my jaw dropped because Fant was still on the board here. I considered him even as early as the 9th round, because I think he's one of those high upside picks for the tight end position based on what he did last year. I have heard some, good points about he could have just real spike weeks, and you don't know when those are going to happen. And that'll be, how he kind of manages his way to a tight end 10 season, which would make it tough. But if you think about, they're giving all these weapons to Drew Lock, right? And either he's going to be awful or he's going to smash because he has so many different options. But he's going to still rely chiefly on Sutton and Fant in my mind, because those were the guys that he had, chemistry with last year, that he actually played with them. He hasn't played with Judy as much, or Hamler has had some injuries. So I think that's arrow up for those guys. I'm going to double down on tight end, because people are sleeping a little bit on Mike Gesicki as well. If Preston Williams isn't 100% healthy, if Devontae Parker turns into a pumpkin again, Gesicki plays so much in the slot PPR league. I don't care how inefficient he's been in his career thus far. He's going to get the targets. He's going to get the receptions. He's a crazy, targeted in the end zone a lot in the Dolphins offense last year. And so between him and Fant, I love that combo. One of those guys are going to be great for me.
Yeah, and I love that double tap in the tight end at late, because a lot of people will just think, oh, I'll get the one tight end and then I'll strain the position. Why not get 2 decent guys right off the bat in the draft that you think have upside? I think Fant and Gesicki right here are great. I'm not a huge Gesicki fan, but like you said, Preston Williams is probably going to start off slow. And so then Gesicki becomes that number 2 receiving option for the Dolphins. And that's just a really good thing to have. Noah Fant, he's someone that I was listening to Fantasy Footballers, and they were like, yeah, he has tight end 5 potential. And so that's what we're looking for. That's what Mike Me Up on Twitter talked about, looking for those guys that have tight end 5 or higher potential. And so that's why I like Noah Fant over someone like a Blake Jarwin, because I don't see Blake Jarwin having that tight end 5 potential with the guys on their team. So just to recap the picks, Carson Wentz 12.10, Noah Fant 12.11, Hunter Renfrow 12.12, Robbie Anderson 13.01, which both of those picks were auto picks, so I'm not sure if they were in the queue or not. Then Mike Gesicki 13.2, Adrian Peterson 13.3. I probably would stay away from that pick because of loss of upside for myself. And then Michael Pittman 13.04. And one thing I wanted to go back to as well, Andrew, is you mentioned rostering 2 defenses. And I really, really like that idea going into the playoffs because it just helps you set up your team nicely. And if you're more top heavy, like if you can have one of those top end tight ends or be able to get one of those top end quarterbacks, then you just need one of those guys. And another example that you talked about was not getting so concerned about who you're starting week by week. And with that, someone last year that was on a tear was Josh Allen. And he was someone that I dropped because his end of season schedule was awful. And there's no reason to hold someone when their end of season schedule is literally the worst out of any QB in the NFL. And instead, it makes sense to drop them for either a high upside running back or for another quarterback. So, yeah.
I think that's a great point. And I had a note that just I pulled from somewhere in the back of my brain is I'm pretty sure that Ryan Fitzpatrick last year had a better fantasy football playoffs than Russell Wilson. And so one of my points of advice would be like, yes, you know who your studs are, you know who you're going to start every week as long as they're healthy. But then there are certain situations at either the quarterback position, like flex wide receiver, defense, and even tight end, where you got to be able to identify the matchup dependent like upside to help put your team over the edge. And I think it's a fine balance because I do get, wanting to stay water and all of that, but you want to be able to have guys that you lock in every week as well. And hopefully you smash a draft and then you do have a lot of guys you can just play every week and they're awesome because that makes your life easier in terms of managing your team. But then, when it comes to winning, you're going to have to think a little bit harder, I'd say, for how you can, win those games.
Yeah, and that's where like waiver wire additions comes up. And I've talked about previous podcasts, finding those guys early. And that's the important thing is if you can find a guy early that's going to dominate and someone just dropped him and like you picked up like a Tyler Higbee for the fantasy football playoffs last year, you were dominating. And I don't know if there was really any predictors with that, but just trying to look at those potential guys that can just take off, especially at the running back position, because running backs are so far few in between. And that if you can see someone like, say, I think a lot of people, including myself, think Zach Moss is going to overtake Devin Singletary. You may disagree on that, Andrew, but if Zach Moss is on your waiver wire, go ahead and pick him up if you're starting to see that snap share start to creep up and match Devin Singletary. And then you can use him. And then eventually, maybe in the fantasy football playoffs, he is just dominating with getting some touchdowns, being able to play really well.
Yeah, and some of these guys are getting drafted by, smart people and we're obviously in a fantasy Twitter draft because they know that down the line they could see a lot more opportunity, like the J.K. Dobbins and the Zach Mosses of the world. Now, those guys will get drafted because they're ranked higher in the ESPN top 300 by someone in your home league, even if it's not you. But the key thing there, as another way to help, improve your roster over the season, is wait until like week 6 or 7 if that was a guy you were targeting in the draft and try to trade for him. Because if he's not seeing any snaps yet, he still has an opportunity to see snaps later. And that's I traded for Miles Sanders last year, and I didn't make the playoffs in that league, but it was a guy who could have helped you win your league in the home stretch if you got him from another team that was sick of holding on to him.
Yeah, I completely agree. So recap what's happened in the draft so far. We had Michael Pittman, 13.04, Aaron Rodgers, 13.05, then a little bit of defensive and quarterback run with the Baltimore defense at 13.06, then Cam Newton, which I like that pick as a high upside quarterback. I picked the Pittsburgh Steelers defense like we were talking about. I think they have high upside for this year, and their defense that I'm fine picking in the 13th round. Do I ever expect to get them in any other draft ever? No, and so I don't expect to take a defense right here normally. Next pick was Keyshawn Vaughn, and I actually like that pick as well for potential long-term. I know everybody's pretty much tossed him for dead on Fantasy Football Twitter, but I still think that this late in a draft, if he doesn't do anything for 4 weeks and you need to drop him, drop him. And then after that, Russell Gage, Chris Thompson, Chicago Bears defense, N'Keal Harry, that's an interesting one to me, Austin Hooper, Sammy Watkins, again, another interesting one, and then Benny Snell Jr. And then now I am back on the clock, actually, so I should probably make my pick before making everybody else wait. Then I picked Justin Jackson. He's currently being touted as the RB2 for the Chargers, so I'm going to go ahead and take him. Joshua Kelly, someone I would be watching in season as someone that may be able to take over the job. I'd be keeping a close eye on that. But in a 15-round league that usually only has like 7 bench spots, I really would rather just have the guy that's a starter right at the bat instead of getting that rookie for myself.
Yeah, Justin Jackson's not a bad pick, especially 2 rounds later than Joshua Kelly. So I like what you did there. And I think because we are drafting with a lot of smart people who are in the know, a lot of those late round targets in your home league are getting taken a lot earlier. Like, I mean, in a home league, I would love to get Nyheim Hines at the 12th, 13th round turn as a pass-catching running back, especially in a 0 RB league. Like you said, a lot of these guys in the late rounds, if they don't show up early on, they're going to get dropped. And some of your guys, that might happen to them too. But another benefit of the 0 RB or modified 0 RB strategy is when you have those like 4 or 5 solid wide receivers, you're going to start them every week, presuming they don't get hurt and that they see their targets. It gives you a lot more freedom to focus all of your fab and save your fab on running backs that are on the waiver wire and immediately come into a new role. Like, go back to 2015. It's when David Johnson took over for Chris Johnson, Cardinals offense. I remember that vividly because David Johnson carried me to a fantasy championship. And it was particularly advantageous because I was so heavy at wide receiver and I had all my other positions filled. I was able to, smash all of my, fab, right? I didn't have to pick up anyone on waivers, so I had priority pick. And I just, had that saved. So then when David Johnson came along, there's my league winner.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think back in like 2018, Nick Chubb was an example of that everybody was talking about. And he was talked about for like 10 weeks. And that's someone, if you can have space to hold on to someone like that you have the potential upside. And that's what we're looking for in these late rounds, is that potential upside. Like for myself, Duke Johnson, I would say, has potential upside. Pittsburgh Steelers defense, that's more just a nice defense to have. Justin Jackson for me has upside. And then you went ahead and went tight end heavy, which was very smart for how your team was created, to where you have Noah Fant, Mike Gesicki, and then you just picked Bryce Love. So is that, again, just a pure upside pick for you?
Yeah, that's pure upside because I know he's been hurt quite a bit, but he was another guy who in college was, right there in terms of Heisman candidacy. And so we know he's talented. We don't know if it's going to translate to the NFL yet. And I think his ADP, compared to Damian Harris, who I was talking about before, Damian Harris is going up, 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 and Bryce Love is going down because the way the training camp has been talking about him, the training camp cognoscenti, that is, it sounds like Bryce Love could be a cut candidate. And so he could be off my team very soon. If he gets cut, he could get signed by or traded to the Bears. That's a potential scenario that could happen. So I'm not completely, out on Bryce Love, especially at the end of the 14th round. So it's kind of nice that people are avoiding him because we don't know exactly what's going to happen there yet.
Yeah, and you want those guys that have that ambiguous situation. And yeah, if Bryce Love, for some reason, steps in and takes Adrian Peterson's role, then you just got an awesome value, and he probably would have a little bit of receiving upside on that team versus, say, the other running backs that are currently there are like Carlos Hyde, DeAndre Washington, LaShawn McCoy, Darrell Williams, Anthony McFarland. Like, none of those guys to me have sure they can be the top guy on their team. And so, yeah, I like Bryce Love right there. And then we have the Dallas Cowboys defense next, Darrell Henderson. And he's another guy I think is a nice late round pick. And I'm actually surprised he lasted till the 15th round. I know he's currently hurt. So that's one of those guys that you pick him and you're like, hey, I'll drop him if I don't need him. And then, Andrew, you drafted the Colts defense, which we'll talk about in just a sec. Ryan Tannehill went. And then Los Angeles Chargers. So what's up with the Colts?
Yeah, so quick note on the Chargers, because you mentioned they just got drafted. It sounds like Derwin James is going to miss significant time, if not the entire season now. I don't remember what I heard there, but And that makes, for me, the Chargers kind of undraftable. They play the Chiefs week 2. You're not going to like that. Looking at the Colts now, that's the spicy pick that I wanted to tease all the way to the last round. So if you're still listening, congratulations, you've made it. Sam Hoppen actually put me onto this team just yesterday. If you look at the first 6 weeks, they play the Jaguars, the Vikings, the Jets, the Bears, the Browns, and the Bengals. Now, the Bengals are kind of spicy, but none of those teams scare me by any means. They traded a first-round pick for DeForest Buckner for interior defensive line, and I think this team has an underrated defense overall, and that defense really helped them be a successful team last year. So, I mean, they struggled with the quarterback play, but as far as being able to run the ball and play good defense, that's what Frank Reich wants to do. I think that schedule really will help them get that done.
Yeah, they're a great pick, especially because, like you just mentioned, their opening schedule looks nice as well. And just to recap the last couple of picks, Justin Jefferson, 15.05, LaShawn McCoy, Seattle Seahawks defense. And then I'm going to pick my guy, Irv Smith Jr. I know I have Travis Kelce, but he's someone that I can see being flex worthy, especially the Vikings do not have a wide receiver 2 right now. I know they're saying it's BC, could be Justin Jefferson. I'd rather take a chance on Irv Smith Jr., and then if all else fails, I have a trade piece for in season if Irv Smith Jr. explodes, or even if I want to hold Irv Smith Jr. and I trade Kelce. And then after that was Darrell Williams, J.D. McKissick, that's an interesting one, Larry Fitzgerald, and then we're on the last pick. I don't know who it's going to be. Yeah, Mr. Irrelevant. If I had to guess, I don't even know if this person's on right now. No, they don't look like they're on. I'm going to go ahead and auto it because that's whatever. Lamar Miller. So that's not a half bad pick, I guess. But yeah, I think that this overall is a nice mock. If you're in a home league, you can get way awesome values on young guys like a Zach Moss, Antonio Gibson, Phillip Lindsay, even like Alexander Madison, Latavius Murray, all those guys that most people don't think about. And then just wait on those defenses. Get someone like Andrew said, the Colts. And if you have to draft a kicker, try not to. No, I'm just playing. If you have to draft a kicker, then you draft them with the last pick or the second to last pick, unless if they really, really fall to where, like, if you can get the top kicker in the 13th round, I'll never penalize anybody for doing that because anybody in the 14th, 15th round in general isn't going to see your starting lineup. And if they do, you're extremely lucky.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I love the Irv Smith Jr. picks. I think there could be a changing of the guard at the tight end position in Minnesota. So I think that's an awesome high upside pick for you there. You'll find out quickly if he's worth holding on to. And that's really how I think we should think about a lot of those late round picks. So well done, Jacob.
I know this took a lot longer than I thought. We're at an hour and a half right now. I didn't expect it to take that long, but I guess 2 minutes per pick, that makes sense. But this is how long everybody's home league draft's going to go. So thank you again for coming on, Andrew. I had a blast. Do you have any projects or articles that you're currently working on?
I think, we talked a lot about defense and kicker at the end here, and I want to work on something for the Undroppables this week. So my one plug would be just go to theundroppables.com. Like you mentioned at the top, I'm the editor-in-chief for that site. So we're going to have a lot of things coming during the season. We've got a couple podcasts that have already started. So Unscripted podcast at Dino Game Theory has started his Dynasty podcast. It's called The Undrafted. So definitely check those out on our website. And then I have my own podcast as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. So at Pod After TD, it's Pod After Touchdown. And then obviously my personal Twitter at Andrew Mackens. So a lot of plugs, but I appreciate any engagement across all of that.
Yeah, for sure. And if anybody's listening to this Thing in the Draft podcast, I've had so many of y'all Undroppables on here. I've had Adam on, Polly on. It's just, y'all are a fantastic group and just fun to talk to on Twitter. And I'm in a league with Jax Falcone, who is the Undrafted podcast, as well as a Stoner. So yeah, I love chatting with all y'all, and I definitely recommend check out the Undroppables, especially if you're new to Dynasty. You can get free Dynasty rankings on y'all's site, or even redraft rankings, or even Dynasty Superflex ADP. There's just so many different options that, like, it's just the Undroppables site's fantastic, newly done. So yeah, I can't recommend it more.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Jacob. I think we have a pretty significant team there. We form like Voltron, and we've each got our own specialties. And so we can, anyone who reach out to the Undroppables and someone, if not multiple from our team, will be able to respond and help you out with your fantasy leagues. So whether that's Dynasty, Redraft, DFS, we can surely help out.
They will swarm on you like hornets, which is fantastic. So thank you again for coming on the show, Andrew. Everyone go and follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Mackens. Also make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the Snake in the Draft podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And let's be snakes this draft season.
Thanks, guys. See ya.